Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Sacred Brew. I'm Khalid Malik. If you're a parent who's just watched the Adolescence Series and thought, oh no, what now? You're not alone. Social media, games, screen time, how much is too much? How little is too little? Where do we draw the line? And how do we hold it with love? If you're a parent, teacher, or a mentor, then this is a must watch for you. I want to acknowledge that you're doing the best you can in a rapidly changing digital world. And I want to really start by honoring that. And as you listen and watch today, I invite you to sit with one simple but powerful question. What does a faith centered digital discipline look like? What does a faith centered digital discipline look like? Joining me on the Sacred Brew is Hina Khan-Mukhtar, an educator, speaker, writer, and a trusted voice for Muslim parents around the world. Her work blends deep spiritual insight with practical parenting wisdom. Make sure to subscribe, share this with another parent who needs it. We all need it. And let's step into this conversation together. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Hina.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. I know I'm both pleasantly surprised that you said yes and also really excited to really dig into some questions that I'm sure you've come across in a lot of your conversations. And I know that I've watched a lot of your videos and you've touched on a lot of things. And the thing about touching and speaking about a lot of things, more questions come up as you sit and reflect. Something else comes up and something else comes, and there's an endless list of questions. But where I really wanted to start is with a series that a lot of our friends have watched online on sort of on TV is the Adolescence series, and I think you've
hmm
watched it as well.
Yes, I have.
Before I sort of scare myself once again and sort of go into what came up for me, I'm curious as to sort of to ask you what came up for you as you watched this, or what was reaffirmed, or perhaps insightful as you watched this series.
Well, what reaffirmed for me was how parents can think they're doing everything right and they can have their
Yeah.
children in the safety of their homes. And
Mm.
right under their very own roof, Shaitan can literally come in and snatch our children, our loved ones away from us. And so we're dealing with a whole new beast, and it's important to be vigilant and it's important to educate ourselves about the dangers that are
Mm.
out there when it comes to this pretty new technology, honestly, social media and the internet and, being able to talk to strangers 24/7 from the comfort of your bedroom where your parents are right down the hallway and they have no idea what's going on. So that's what it reaffirmed for me, for sure.
I mean, a lot of, I think the initial sort of instinctive reactionary response was, "That's it, off, turn it off now, get off it now." Is what is that? Is that the appropriate response or reaction? That's not really a response; it's more of a reaction.
Yeah, it's kind of like how when the car came out and there were people who were like, no, I still believe in the horse and buggy. I was reading a book just today with some of my students where the dad bought a new car. The story was set around, maybe the 1920s or before that. And the dad buys a new car and he talks about how he still prefers the horse and buggy and how a car can't give you
Mhm.
the loyalty and a love that your horse can. And I just realized, every generation deals with this where the new technology coming in feels threatening and the instinct is to want to reject it and have nothing to do with it and think that the old ways were better, which they may have been. But the truth is the new technology and the new ways of doing things aren't going anywhere. And so we have to educate ourselves about how to navigate through this new world that's opening up in front of us and that our children are going to be dealing with, and to teach rules of safety, to teach rules of etiquette, to teach very clear guidelines and boundaries, to keep channels of communication open with our children. pretty much the surest way to get your kids to do something you don't want them to do is to tell them they absolutely are not allowed to do it and aren't allowed to be around it. So instead, showing our kids that, okay, we're in this together and let's learn about it. And why do we need to be safe? What does safety look like? And, how do we move forward? And so I think that was what came out of the show Adolescence for me was how important it is to be constantly communicating with your kids. The kids are living their entire worlds, entire lives outside our homes that we don't even know about. And if we don't talk to them about what's going on with them, someone else will.
You bring up the old and the new, right? And we often hear it, my parents' sort of generation, this is how we used to do things, and
Right.
and it really is, as parents today, you're juggling between the old and the new. And I think it was Imam Ali radiallahu anhu said, you can't raise your kids the way that you were raised.
Right.
And so how do you do you bring in the old and mash it with the new, or do you like what is your perspective on, this is how we were raised, and look at the kids today, and how do you sort of switch between the old and the new?
The way I personally switch with the old and the new is by constantly pointing out to the children about the wisdom that's embedded inside of our deen and how all the answers to all these new age problems are there and they've been there
Mm,
for since the beginning. And
mm,
there's some certain core truths that don't change over time. And if we look at where certain roads are leading us, what direction we're going in, if they're
mm,
taking us away from certain truths, certain etiquettes, certain things that we know are required of us, then we know that that's something to reject. But if it's something like the internet itself, what I always tell my kids and my students is that it's a double-edged sword. It can be used for good and it can be used for bad, right? It's
right.
up to us. It's up to us. It's up to our intentions. It's up to even today coming on your, podcast, coming on this interview, I had to really think about, well, what are my intentions? Why am I doing this? What am I hoping to get out of it? And for
Mm,
me, the answer was very clear and simple. It's to help even one person out there, change one thing that they were doing that wasn't working for them and find a better way of doing it and stop one thing that maybe wasn't working for them and
yeah.
and maybe take on something new that they had never done. So just, we're in this together. We're fellow wayfarers going through life and
Mm,
I
mm.
consider myself like an older Baji now to, the people who are behind me. And I look to my elders for their wisdom and their advice. So we're all in this together.
Yeah, well, it's Uncle Khalid now, so I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm cool with that too. How do you think the constant digital stimulation from games and social media is shaping the emotional resilience of kids today?
I think what's going on now, what we're seeing is that kids want instant gratification. They need to be
Mm,
constantly getting those dopamine hits, right? So that they're
mm,
constantly feeling like they're being gratified, that they're getting things at the touch of a button. The whole thing of being online, even beyond video games, even just socializing online, that communicating through emojis instead of learning how to read a person by their facial expression and their body language when you're sitting with them in person. So there are real concerns that are coming up with taking so much of what used to be day-to-day life and putting it online. Now,
mm,
with social media, how so much has become performative, people aren't being honest about who they are. They're putting out curated images and they think that everybody else's life is the real life, and they're not able to distinguish between haq and batil, truth and falsehood. So yeah, I I think people what I'm seeing with young people is impatience, is
mm.
fragility, anxiety at much earlier ages. So,
Yeah.
and I'm seeing the opposite, inshallah, mashallah, I'm seeing much healthier mindset. much healthier attitudes and outlooks from those kids whose parents are delaying their entrance into the world of social media and video games and, constant internet usage.
You know, there's something that I've heard a lot of parents saying that I've lost my child to the screen. I've lost my child to the digital world. I mean, and I think it's very the term lost and a lot of the language and the symbolism within language that we use is very subjective. In your opinion, how would you define um, if a child is now lost to the screen? What does that look like for you?
I saw it a little just recently, not I mean not too long ago, where there were parents were really concerned about their son and his failure to launch,
Mm,
where, he just wasn't finishing college, he wasn't moving out of the home, he wasn't getting a job, he seemed to have depression, he seemed to have anxiety, and they didn't know how to help him, they didn't know what was going on with him. And when, we dug a little deeper to find out what his day-to-day routine looks like, he would be
mm,
up all night and while the
right.
parents were sleeping, and then he would sleep all day during the day. And when he was up all night, he would have these headphones on and he'd be playing video games and he'd be talking to people from God knows where. He had this whole
Mm,
other social world that he would enter at night. And my advice to the mom was my advice was take his door off his hinges. There's no reason
mm,
for him to need privacy in his bedroom if he's in your home. He can have privacy in the
mm,
restroom. Whatever he needs to do
mm,
privately can be done in the restroom, but there's no reason for him to have this private world that he enters into at night while you guys are sleeping and you have no idea. I personally didn't have the himma to tell the mother this. I didn't have the strength and
mm,
the bravery to tell her
yeah.
this, but I was convinced that he had a pornography addiction,
Mm,
because all the symptoms were there, just not engaging with the world, being up all night, being in his
yeah.
bedroom with the door closed, being on
Yeah.
screens, and then having absolutely no appetite for life, for real life, for getting
Mm,
out and dealing
mm,
with people and dealing with the world. So to me, that was a
yeah.
very clear example of somebody who was lost to the world of screens.
And something that we and again this is permission to speak freely, so to I often tell our children who will go on a game and they'll be playing a football game or a soccer game on the phone, and we'll give them a set time, and then we'll say, listen, you've got X amount of time, and then that's it. When we say you're off, you're off. And then what'll happen is inevitably we'll say it's time, and then there'll be this reaction and response, that dopamine hit, and we know
Mm-hmm,
it's coming. We
mm-hmm,
know we're expecting that it's coming, and then we'll voice to them, this is why we don't want you guys on the phones, and this is not the dad speaking, because the moment I say get off the phones, this is how you react and this
mm-hmm,
is how you behave. So the phone is the problem, and we're going to take the phones away, and until the time comes where we say off the phones and it's just handed over,
mm-hmm,
that's when we know the phones are a problem. And it's
mm-hmm,
almost like I'm speaking to myself, but I'm actually speaking to the boys, for example.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
where is where is what do you see perhaps missing in that scenario?
Well, anytime a child, if they're throwing a tantrum because of something that's being taken away from them, to me, that's a sign that, yeah, you need a break. You need to like
Yeah.
cut it off completely, because you're seeing this behavior come out, this Jekyll and Hyde behavior where they're your normal, easygoing, good kids, and then they turn into these literally like monsters. I'm not talking about your kids personally, just
No,
kids,
I get
when
it. Yeah.
yeah, when
Mm,
they're the thing that gives them the pleasure is being taken away from them, the visceral reaction they have to that, that's a sign that this it's an unhealthy attachment. And
mm,
so for me, the way if my kids were into video games, and the few times we did, when our kids were little, we tried to introduce video games in a homeopathic way, which was like,
what's that?
my husband would play with the kids. They would have set times, like, okay, at this time we can, use it as entertainment. They played
Mm,
FIFA and they played Star Wars. They didn't play any
yeah.
games that were about killing or, anything related to the military, um,
mm,
or anything that was unethical behavior, or anything criminal that
mm,
was being rewarded in the video games. They didn't
mm,
play anything like that. The interesting thing was my kids never really took off with it. Like it just
mm,
never attracted them that much. What we had to keep our eyes open for is when we were in other people's homes and their kids were the ones
mm.
who like to spend their time, because parents again will think they're safe, they're in their friend's home, they're
Right.
socializing with their friends, they think the kids are in the bedroom socializing on their own, but the kids aren't socializing the way you would think they would be, right? Many of the time,
Mm,
many times it's spent on screens. So
mm.
I would
Yeah.
recommend that if your kids are playing video games, my number one advice to parents is play the video games with your kids. Make it into a
Mm,
family activity. And yeah, you have a set time. We do it together. And then when it's done, we're done, right? But it shouldn't be used as a babysitter. It shouldn't be used as a pacifier. It shouldn't be used as a
mm,
reward. We interview families before they're allowed to join our Islamic school that we have here in Northern California. And one of the things we talk
mm,
to them about is their media usage in the home and how much time the kids spend around screens. And we had a family recently who, when they talked about media usage, they told us, oh, yeah, we use it as the carrot. We use it as a carrot to reward our kids when they do well. And that's the only
mm.
time they're exposed to it, which is funny because that's completely the opposite attitude we would want. It shouldn't be treated like
Yeah.
it's some kind of a reward, right? It should be just very matter of fact. We use it in a healthy way for a set amount of time and we're done. But it shouldn't be a reward, because when you take rewards away, then the kids are going to do whatever they can to get it, right? It's like if you take
Mm.
sugar away completely and you say you're not
Right.
allowed to have sugar, then when the kids are around sugar and you're not there, they're going to go crazy with the sugar, right? So again, it's just about making sure that we're helping our kids develop healthy attitudes around
Yeah.
this technology and this form of entertainment that honestly is not going anywhere.
No, it's not, and it's so hard. I mean, I've heard, sort of the previous gen, well, I've heard a couple of, and it's sort of few and far between when you hear people whether they say we're completely, or my daughters never grew up, or my sons never grew up with phones, and then admit in the next line, my daughters now have kids, and you can't get away from the phone. It's
Right.
it's just there. I mean, it's in school.
Yeah.
It's everywhere, and so I guess
Yeah.
sort of as a segue, what does then a faith-centered um, discipline look like in a digital world? Or what is a digital, um, a faith-centered digital discipline look like then?
Well, one way of faith-centered discipline, and that's a great question, by the way. I never really thought about it. And now thinking about it, I can see that, again, this tool, this device can be used for a lot of good. And we can teach our
Mm,
kids that, look, all the benefits that can come with this. We can think of this technology and this device as a blessing, as long as we're using it the way it's meant to be used. That's what blessings are all about, right? The blessing of sight, the blessing of hearing, any blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, the way you show shukr for that blessing is to use that blessing in the way it was meant to be used. So the blessing
mm,
for your sight is that you look at things that are pleasing to Allah. You don't look at things that Allah has disobeyed, has told you not to look at, right? You don't disobey Allah with using your sight. Hearing, you listen to that which is pleasing to Allah. You don't use the blessing of hearing by listening to things that Allah has forbidden you from listening to. So the same thing with the internet, with social media, with video games. How can we use this technology in a way that it will be a blessing for us and it will not be a witness against us on the day of judgment? So, you can use your phone or your computer to learn how to read Quran. You can improve your tajweed with teachers who are on the other side of the globe. You can, you know, s- listen to talks about the Sita. You can learn about stories about the prophets. You can learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from scholars all around the world now. And you can use it to figure out the Qibla for prayer. You can use it to figure out your prayer timings. It's you. it can be used in a way that allows
mm,
you
mm,
to practice your deen and to navigate your way through the world as a Muslim. And there are people who are doing it, and that's another thing, making sure that inshallah our kids have role models, that we have friends who are role models who are using this technology in a mindful way. I know of people who will say that I will never take my phone in a bathroom because I read the Quran
mm,
off of my phone, right? So I'm
mm,
going to
mm.
give it that same respect that I would give a copy of the Quran. And that's a way of using the phone in a mindful way, and talking about it in a way that forces you to look at things deeper than the superficial level.
There's a lot to reflect in that comment, and I think just a bit of self-reflection, and essentially that is the attempt with the use of this technology is to show, and thankfully, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of content now, in you on YouTube, etc., on different platforms that are deen-centric, and especially when it comes to the seerah and other aspects of the deen as well.
Mhm.
And I think there's certainly more room for growth. And I'm just gauging my kids. We've got three smaller children, two in primary and one about to transition into secondary. Um,
Mash-
and the response is, oh, but I don't want to. It's boring. Again, another Islamic lecture, and that's and as a parent, I'm thinking, I never meant for it to be a lecture. I
Right.
meant for it to be a sort of a space for knowledge. But
Yeah.
it's interesting how they perceive it as, "Oh, not another Islamic lecture."
Yeah.
Um,
So the
right?
way I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Were you
No, no,
done?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
go
no,
ahead.
the way what I realized what happened with our kids when they were a lot younger is to let it be the background noise of their lives, right? So
Mm,
it's you've got your Islamic lecture playing while you're cooking in the kitchen. You've got your
mm,
Islamic lecture playing while you're driving, on that 6-hour trip and your kids are in the car, while at the same time balancing it out by allowing them to listen to their books on tape or their stories or their Islamic nasheeds or their songs that they want to listen to as well. But I remember we would take our kids to Islamic lectures at the various
mm,
masajid and the various
mm,
centers, and we would give them notebooks and pens that they could draw in and doodle if they wanted, or they could take notes from whatever they were hearing. But we didn't tell them you're here to learn, right? They were just
mm.
there while supporting us while we did our learning. And then we made
Yeah.
sure to give them what they needed, like, oh, we're going to go out for ice cream now, or oh, we're going to go for miniature golfing, or go-kart racing, or all the fun things that they like to do. We'll go see a movie that we approve of in the movie theater. Like, we'll make sure to balance it out with things that they enjoy as well, because you do have to give the nafs, the ego, a little bit of what it desires, right? You have to give it a little bit of what it wants so that then you can take from the nafs what you want from it. And so I was actually very surprised by some very, very deep Islamic concepts that my kids were able to get and
Mm,
understand. But
mm,
it wasn't because I had taught it to them by sitting them down and lecturing
mm.
them. It's because it was the background soundtrack. I don't want to say background noise. I said that earlier. I don't, it was the soundtrack of their lives, right? It's what they heard
Mm.
in the background.
No, you're so spot on. I mean, during Ramadan, for example, we'd set we'd sort of told them we're going to be listening to Imam Umar Sulaiman's Barzakh series, and
Mhm.
and so that was something that they looked forward to. And you're right, my wife will have something playing on TV,
Yeah.
and they'll be just doing about their thing,
Yeah,
and then later on they'll come back with a question, and you're like, oh, you were
exactly.
sort of
E-
listening in as
Exactly.
well,
Yeah.
and that's obviously it was fantastic, and you go,
Yeah.
oh, okay, but they are actually listening,
Yeah.
um,
It's a very
and
gratifying moment when that happens. So
it is.
yeah.
Can it have happen every moment? No.
Yeah.
Um, and we recently had Ustad Mohammed Bajor in Australia,
Uh-huh.
who's from Texas, and he had a session, and again, it was like, mommy and Baba want to go and listen to him, so come with us.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and I think I also want to give kids generally some credit because they do, they're a lot is thrown at them, much more than I think when I was growing up. Although I also grew up playing video games on a Pentium IBM machine, and
Right.
on the age of floppy disks and so on. But and they sat there, and so the boys were with me, and my daughter was with my wife in the other section, and came back together in the car, and they had some questions. We answered as best we could, and but the fact that they were sort of listening and taking it in, and also just doodling away, as you
Yeah.
said, it is. I think as parents, we also need to pause and just be aware that hey, they've actually heard and
Yeah.
they've absorbed a little. Now let them I don't know, cool down a little bit, calm down just a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, and let them process it. I'll never forget this one
Yeah.
time I took my son with me to this retreat, and he was like maybe 11, 12 years old, and he went with me to, to be a support for me. And in this other state, and the scholar who was speaking there was known for being very erudite. His language was very high level. He was also known for being very monotonous and could
Mm,
very easily put you to sleep. And
right.
I didn't think my son was getting anything out of it. To tell you the truth, even I had a hard time making sure I was grasping a lot of the gems that he was dispensing. But on the
Mm,
way home, we were at the airport, and I asked him, I said, "What did you get out of this, retreat that we were on?" And he said, "I didn't really understand much. There wasn't really much I got, but there was only one thing I understood." And I said, "Oh, well, what's that?" And he said, "The only thing I took away," and this was after like 3 days of lectures, right? He said, "The only thing I got from it was that being happy isn't the point of life. Like, happiness is not the point of life. The point of life is to know Allah. And
subhanallah. Mm,
you may know Allah coming to him through sadness, you may know him coming through
mm, mm.
happiness, but the point at the end is to know him. It's not to be happy." And I just told him, "You know what? If that's all you got, it's enough to carry you for the rest of your life, inshallah." And he was like
Subhanallah.
11, and that's what he took from those three
MashaAllah.
days, mashallah. Alhamdulillah.
Wow. That is profound, mashallah. Um, there's we spoke about video games, and there is a plethora of games out there that I'm still, learning. What are your, we've so, and I'd love to name it. And what are your, and I think you've also just done some research. Does that are you willing to share some of the research? Is that for a later
Yeah, I mean, I'm
stage?
still in the process of researching, but as far as like video games are concerned, I haven't kept up the way I would have liked because my boys are all grown
Yeah,
and out of the home now,
yeah.
mashallah. And the kids
Mm,
I am teaching are a lot younger and are not, we have a policy at our school. The kids aren't playing video. It's not an issue right now amongst the kids that I'm teaching, but back in the day, a few years ago, I know the big game that everybody was playing was Grand Theft Auto, and I
mm,
thought that it was really interesting, something I didn't know about, that Dr. Leonard Sachs, his last name is spelled Sax, and I recommend anybody who has children to read any book that this psychiatrist has written. His name is Dr. Leonard Sachs,
mm,
and pretty much everything he teaches and says, it's all backed by science, but it's in line with everything that we as Muslims believe. And
mm,
he said that there's a phenomenon now with video games where there's a concept called moral inversion, which is everything in society that we know to be evil, that we know to be haram, that we know to be criminal, that we know to be illegal, that in certain video games, if you do those things, you get points. And the more points you get, the higher chance you have of winning. So in order to win at the video game, you have to do all these haram things. And he gave all these examples from Grand Theft Auto, which I won't go into in case you have children who are listening to your talk, to this interview. But you know, a lot of parents aren't aware that video games are also teaching morals and they're teaching
mm,
lessons. They just think it's a form of entertainment that their kid is there
mm,
just, pressing some buttons. But it's actually, these video games are actually teaching our kids what to love and what to hate. And it's the opposite of what Ardeen teaches, you know? And so
Mm,
Grand Theft Auto would have been an example, which I think it's
mm.
still a popular game that, you know,
Yeah,
it's something you, I think every
yeah.
parent should know to like, keep out of the home. That's why I say parents should be playing the games with their kids so that
Mm,
they can
mm.
see for themselves and say, okay, no, this is not something we're going to be doing.
What is the what are the thematics of your research? Are you able to share?
Uh, by thematics, tell
What
me
is the
what you.
research about? The premise of the research and what is
Oh, so the thing is, many parents are now asking about how to deal with screens, and many
mm,
schools are asking. A lot of
mm,
schools are reaching out to me and talking about how in fact, even while I'm talking to you right now, I have texts coming in from a principal of a school asking about coming to talk on this subject. And people are just overwhelmed and they don't know what all the data is saying out there. They want to know what the data is saying. They want it presented. They want it presented in a way that they can digest. But more than that, they want practical steps and solutions.
mm,
They
mm,
want tips on what to do. They don't want to just be made to feel like they're bad parents. They want
right.
alternatives. And so for that, you need people who've kind of like seen it or understood it and know how to present it. So that's, that's where
Mm,
I would love to be able to help in any way. And so because
mm,
I'm not in the world of video games right now, I am researching it. I'm studying it. I'm reading a lot of books about it. One book that I'm reading right now just about what a number social media is doing on young people is a book called The Anxious
mm.
Generation, which
Oh
I
yes.
highly
Mm,
recommend for
mm.
all parents of kids who are asking to be on social media should be reading this book, The Anxious Generation.
There's some games that we've had discussions with our children, and for example, I don't, you probably would have come across Roblox.
Right, I've been
I
thinking
don't know if
about
you come
that.
across Roblox, and there's Minecraft, and there's a whole lot of other
Mhm,
games where there is an opportunity for someone else to enter your world. And I was reading
mhm.
something the other day, and Roblox is one of these games. Have you come across it, by the way? Have you
I've
heard of
I've
it or
been
no?
hearing about it, but I don't know enough
Yeah.
about it to comment on it.
Eh,
Yeah.
I guess my question is not so much on Roblox, but these games where, and now, so what they're saying is that even though the producers of the game have have brought together very strict guidelines as to who is allowed where and when,
Mhm.
it doesn't really make a difference.
It
It's,
doesn't.
you know, right? And
Right.
try and
Mm.
explain that to our kids because all of my friends are playing it.
Yeah.
All of my friends are doing it. Why can't, please, Baba, please, no,
Yeah.
please,
Yeah.
mommy, no, no, it's,
Yeah.
and no one's gonna come and talk to me, and what
Yeah.
is your, I mean, it's it's a
Yeah.
tough navigation.
Yeah, it is tough navigating, and this is where the advice I give parents is how important it is to conscientiously work at building like-minded communities. How
Mm,
important it is to, you don't need tons of friends. Your kids don't need 100 best friends. They literally need maybe
mm,
two, maybe three really good
yeah,
friends.
yeah,
Even one
yeah,
can be just a huge blessing, right? But to hand pick people that you respect and you admire, and if you find families where the husbands get along, the wives get along, and the children get along, those people, those families are diamonds, and you just want to grab them and hold on to them. And make sure that you, as parents, are educating yourselves on what's going on with kids and
mm,
talking about what your goals and what your aspirations are for your children. What do you want to see your child to look like in the future? What are your hopes for your child to look like when they're adults? And how do you get there? And you talk to your friends about it. And hopefully you and your friends can be on the same page and you can support each other. The families can support each other so that
yeah,
in this world of craziness, in this like stormy world that we're in, you guys can create the eye of the storm where things are peaceful and calm and quiet and not chaotic and everybody's on the same page. And you guys are the weirdos together, right? It's very, very hard to be the only one trying to do the right thing and to be
mm,
the one who's always left out, the one who um, can't do what everybody else is doing. I'll give you an example. My really good friend once called me really upset because she immediately on the phone call was like, Hina, what is this I hear? Like, why are your children allowed to watch PG-13 movies? And my kids at that time were like 10, 11, 12. And I was kind of thrown back, taken aback, and I was a little defensive, like, oh, yeah, we do. We allow our kids to watch uh movies that are PG-13. And I was kind of flustered, and she started asking me questions about what we watch and why we watch them and how we watch them. And in the end, she was the one who came to the conclusion, and she's the one who said it to me. She goes, "Oh, I get it." She said, "We have a general rule that we follow the guidelines that PG-13, kids under the age of 13 don't watch those movies." She's like, "But in your home, you watch the movies with your children. You and your
mm,
husband watch the films as a family. You fast forward anything that's inappropriate. You
mm,
explain to them the nuances and the context of whatever's going on in the storyline." She said, "Whereas in my home, I don't watch movies. I have no interest in
mhm,
movies. When I put on a movie, I want to know it's safe. And so the rule in our home is that you are not watching anything PG-13." So we realized that that was the difference in how we were using the television set. But the deeper point I'm trying to make is how much it rocked her world. The fact that my kids were able to watch movies that were PG-13 because her kids were coming to her and saying, "But Auntie Hina's kids are allowed to watch PG-13 movies. Why aren't we?" And then all of a sudden, she had no leg to stand on because of what I was doing in my home. Right. And so, but that's what happens when you have a like-minded community. You guys can support each other. And so then I gave her ideas about certain movies that would be okay to show her kids and how to show it to them so that they could also feel like they were included in whatever we all were doing.
No, that's what we do too. We tend to, well, in fact, not tend to, but we do watch movies with the kids. Or if they're watching it, we are there around as they're watching, and things will come up and questions will be asked, and we're there to answer. And I think these questions, we, I've always been that we need to invite these questions
Mhm.
because if not us, then who else?
Exactly.
I don't want one of them coming to me with these questions.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears just a little bit. Ideally, we'd love to have our children, practice Islam regularly and pray regularly, etc. And I'm sure you come across this question a gazillion times. But how do we encourage them without getting into a battle? Where it's, hey, get up, it's time for Fajr. Hey, let's go for Zohar. Really,
Mhm.
do I have to go and do wudu as well?
Mhm.
And how do we? What's the even though they haven't reached puberty, but
Mhm.
what is what is your advice to parents that really would like for them to embody some of these practices and obviously at the outset, are you as parents embodying those practices before you, so assuming that the parents are embodying some of these practices, how do you
Mhm.
get your kids to at least get into that?
What are the ages of your children?
Mine.
Yeah.
So the eldest is 11, 8, and 7.
11, 8, and 7. Okay. So different families have different ways of doing things. I can only tell you what worked for us. And so this is what I share with people in the hopes that maybe it can be replicated, inshallah. So until the age of 7, we had no expectations of our children. We
Mm,
only role modeled for them how important prayer was for us. And we taught them the bits and pieces of prayer. We taught them,
mm,
this is what you say in ruku, this is what you say in sajda. We taught them
mm,
Surah Fatiha. We taught them all the different parts of the prayer and taught them how they get put together. But we had zero expectations. Like, if they
mm.
wanted to join us to pray, fine. If they didn't want to pray, fine. I remember one of my boys at age 5 saying, "I'm never going to pray." And we were in Jamaat, and he lay down next to us and he said, "I'm never going to pray." And I was like, "Okay, that's your choice. Nobody can
Yeah,
force you to pray. This is between you and Allah." And eventually he did join the prayer because he didn't want to be left out of what we were
yeah.
doing. And what the kids grew up seeing is that prayer was nothing messed with our prayer, right? Mashallah,
Mm.
mashallah. That's what they saw. They saw
Mm.
that even if their father was in the middle of Disneyland, when the time for prayer came in, he found a
Yeah.
corner and he said his prayer. And
Yeah.
I know of a young man who told me once that when he was a child, he remembered seeing his father weep once because he inadvertently missed a prayer. And he said, that did more for
Uh,
me about the importance of prayer. It taught me more about the importance of prayer than all the lectures in the world. Just seeing
mm.
his father's response to realizing he'd been derelict,
Mm.
right? That he'd been negligent in this duty.
Mm.
And so, just showing our kids that it was a non negotiable for us, but we had no
Mm.
expectations of them. And making
Mm.
sure and I'll be honest, we changed our friends. We used to have a very different crowd of friends when we were a newlywed couple. And
Mm.
when we had our first child, we still had a certain crowd of friends. But eventually, when we had this awareness that, hey, we love these friends, we care about them, but they're not necessarily who we want our kids to turn out to be like, and they're not
Mm.
necessarily the role models we want for our children. I can honestly say that our kids grew up with their parents' friends prayed, and their friends' parents prayed, and their friends prayed, and their parents
Mm.
prayed. So everyone in their circle, it was inconceivable the idea that prayer time comes in and people don't get up to pray. So it was just a
Yeah.
norm, right? And people ask all the time, how do I teach the deen to my children? You don't teach the deen, you live the
Mm.
deen. You live the
Yeah.
deen, and the kids see it as the norm, and they see it as a better way of living, and they see it as the way of life. And then at the age of 7, what I did was I had all of our friends who were very close to my kids, I had them write messages about prayer to my children on their 7th birthdays, and talking about the importance of prayer, how much they love prayer, what they hoped for my children about prayer. Some of them gave advice about what to do when you feel a prayer slump, like when you're not feeling the desire to pray. Compiled all these messages, including messages from their grandparents and their aunts and uncles, put them in a journal, gifted that journal to my children on their 7th birthday, and then told them, had a nice 7th birthday celebration, and then told them, congratulations, you get to choose a prayer. You get to
Mm.
choose one prayer that you are now going to do for the rest of your life, and you're never going to leave it, inshallah, and it's up to you to decide which prayer you want to take on. And
Mm.
all of my boys chose Maghrib
Mm.
because that was the
Yeah.
time
Mm.
their father would come home from work, and they
Mm.
would pray Maghrib in Jamaat with their dad. And
Mm.
but once they chose Maghrib prayer, they never left it. Meaning, it
Yeah.
didn't matter
Mashallah.
if we were
Mm.
at the beach, it didn't matter if we were at the swimming pool, in the middle of a mall, at a party, at a wedding, at the airport, didn't matter. If Maghrib came in, prayed Maghrib. Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Isha, up to you. Pray it, don't
Mm.
pray it, we're not asking. If you do it, it's between you and Allah. If you don't do it, nobody's questioning you. But Maghrib, you're going to do for an entire year. Then on their 8th birthday, we told them, guess what? You get to choose a second prayer now. Oh, and by the way,
Mhm.
we only expected the fard from them, the faraid. We
Yeah.
didn't expect
Mm.
sunnahs. So at age 8, they chose a second prayer, and most of them chose Asr because they could do it right after their school classes. So then they're praying Maghrib and they're praying Asr until 8.5. Then at 8.5 they chose a third prayer. So suppose they take Isha, so now they're doing Asr, Maghrib, and Isha. And then at 9, age 9, they choose a fourth prayer. And so they're now taking on Dhuhr. Then at 9.5, they take on the fifth prayer, Fajr. And then at age 10, they take on the Sunnahs. So inshallah, the
Mm.
goal is that by age 10, they're doing all of their prayers, but it's a slow, incremental, gradual building of the responsibilities and the duties, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Oh,
And the whole time teaching them the fiqh, teaching them the
yeah.
fiqh of prayer, teaching them the fiqh of wudu,
Yeah.
but not having any and making it clear to them that the age for teaching you your deen is 7 to 14. So it
Mm,
is, we
mm,
have to face Allah. And
mm,
if we don't teach you, we are responsible. So we're going to do our part and making it clear to the children that this is your right. It is your right to be taught the deen. And you can hold us accountable if we don't. So we're doing our responsibility. Whether you pray or not, whether you hold on to it or not, is up to you.
yeah.
But on the day of judgment, we want to be able to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say we did our
I
part.
mean,
So
I
making
mean,
them realize what a weighty responsibility it is, and that inshallah one day they too have to pass the baton on to the next
mm,
generation. And I that was another conversation I used to have with my children about how there's this long chain of Muslims in our ancestry, alhamdulillah, and each generation took the responsibility of teaching the next generation. And I, inshallah, refuse to be the weak link. I refuse to be the one who's going to be the
mm,
cause of this long chain breaking, right? Talking to the kids about how, alhamdulillah, we have our deen because of the du'as of our ancestors, because some elder in our family prayed for the coming progeny to continue to be Muslim, reminding our children to pray that their children and their grandchildren and their great grandchildren, that the progeny to come after them is Muslim until the end of time, just making them realize about their place in the world, but ultimately talking to them about how prayer is not about a feeling, right? It's not about when you're
mm,
feeling it, because that's what the world is going to teach them, that unless you're
mm.
feeling it, you don't pray. It doesn't mean
Right.
anything. What we told our kids is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge of your heart and he's in charge of your mind. And, if your heart and your mind isn't into it, you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring your heart and mind into it. But as long as you have any kind of control over your body, you make sure your body gets to that spot and prays and bows down in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And reminding them again of, the story of Iblis and how he refused to bow down. And so if we choose to not bow down, who are we listening to? Who are we
Mm,
following? So it's just, gradual incremental conversations, making sure they understand these characters who come up, Iblis and
yeah.
Adam alayhi salam and all these people and creations of Allah who came before us who are there to teach us certain lessons. So
Admittedly, yeah, Maghrib is our favorite time too at home, and just just as you were speaking, and if one of them isn't feeling up to it, we'll get into our Maghrib, and they'll eventually just come. But
yeah,
they'll just come midway, and it's so true, and it is, and you're absolutely spot on. It has to be. It's not taught, but it's lived. It's it's it's
yeah.
embodied. And I think that's a key. I think what a crucial key really.
Yeah,
Um,
I had the one sheikh told us that after they would pray in Jamaat, he would go around and just ask each of his children to mention a dua that they wanted everybody to say. And so that was their opportunity to like share what was on their mind, and everybody together would pray for the person to get what they wanted from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so
no,
um
yeah, but love guide our children
I
uh,
mean,
on the path and to this path.
I mean,
Um, Ya Rabbil Alameen. I mean, yeah, I'm sort of nearing towards and there's so much, but I know that I could go on for a long time. We talk about education, and you mentioned this a couple of times now, and your initiative, which is Ilm Tree, I think. Is it Ilm
right.
Tree? Am I going to get that right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'd love to sort of um, uh, get into that just a little bit. But before I do, we often hear of Islamic upbringing has to start at home, and I think we're all in agreement there. Um, but in the Western context, schooling is a big part of the equation.
Right.
I know when COVID happened, we were in Karachi at the time, and my wife actually, Allah bless her, she was courageous enough to take them out of school, and three of them, um,
Mhm.
and began to homeschool them.
Right.
And it is it is it was rewarding and oh so difficult,
Mhm.
um, to be doing that. And then we sort of moved here to Australia, but we look at the Western context. What's your and we're sort of now transitioning into secondary and so on. What's your view and perspective on sort of, Islamic schools versus, say, Christian schools versus, say, public schools? A lot of people would say, um, as long as there is a structure and embodiment at home, because my brother and I, we went to Catholic colleges here
Hmm.
in Australia,
Hmm.
and so we had a Catholic education, but we seemed to be okay at the end. But what is your perspective? Should they be in Islamic schools? Is that too much, maybe? Because some Islamic schools have a very strict adherence to a type of uniform, especially for girls who may not be ready for the hijab at
Hmm.
school at such a young
Hmm.
age. Are we making if we're enforcing that? Are we drawing them away from the deen? What are some of your perspectives here?
Well, there's no one cookie cutter answer for everybody.
No. Mm,
There's so many factors that come to play. It first and foremost, what is your child's temperament like? What would speak best for your child, right? What would they work well with you at home? Do they need to be in a school environment? Is your child a follower or is your child a leader? Is your child exceptionally gifted and schools just holding them back? Or does your child need certain kinds of support, certain kinds of resources that you can't provide that maybe a school can? So there's a lot to look at there. And then also the quality of the Islamic schools. Sometimes Islamic schools can actually do a lot of harm if they don't
mm,
teach the deen in a loving way and in a positive way. Some kids will come out of school walking away from the dean, unfortunately, based on their experiences there. And there's some kids who will go to non-Muslim schools and be able to recognize that what their parents are teaching them at home and offering them at home is far superior to what the rest of the world seems to be doing. And so they'll hold on to the values of their parents. Alhamdulillah. So there's just a lot to look at. What I will
mm,
say is that especially here in America right now, there are certain agendas that have started creeping into the school, and there's a certain kind of indoctrination
mm.
that's going on
Yep.
with the children. And it came up back in 2012 is when gay marriage was legalized here in
Mm,
California. And it came up for a lot of the immigrant parents who had come here from Pakistan, who are like my age, who were shocked, absolutely shocked to find out at the dinner table when they would be talking about what's going on in current events that their children agreed with gay marriage, right? And their children were
mm,
like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's all about love. And all of a sudden, these parents were like, how can I be on such a different page than my children? Like, how do our children
mm,
not know the values of our traditions, our deen, our culture, our background? And what they didn't realize is that their children had been indoctrinated since kindergarten
mm,
into accepting
mm,
a certain kind of mindset, right? A certain kind of philosophy. And so there are some shuyukh here in the West who say that there can be an argument made now that putting your children in that kind of environment, knowing what's being taught in the schools, that it's actually haram. There are some
mm,
scholars who will actually go that far to say that. Again, I don't, I'm no mufti. I can't make any judgment like that, but I also don't like black and white answers. People have different
right, right.
situations. And we have to have compassion for one another. And if anything, we have to realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge and dua is the weapon of the believer. So we have to be praying
Mm,
for our kids first and foremost. But at the same time, I don't think a lot of people realize how much young children, especially like preschoolers, kindergartners, first graders, how much they adore their teachers. I mean, I see it working with kids that age that we are literally just second to the parents, right? They see us as
mm,
another set
mm,
of parents. So if your child's teacher is not teaching values or is not teaching a lifestyle that you agree
mm,
with, then I wouldn't have my child around
mm.
a person who I fundamentally disagreed with,
Yeah,
for 8 hours a day. So kids are like sponges. They are just constantly soaking
yeah.
in. And when they get squeezed, whatever's in them is what comes out. So, um, but first and foremost, yes, the home. The home is where the kids get the armor. but like we saw from that television show Adolescence, right? Your kids can be in the home and they can still be snatched
Yeah.
away from you. And
Yeah.
so just talking to your kids a lot about what they're learning at school, whether it's an Islamic school, whether it's a Christian school or a secular school, finding out what they're learning, what they agree with, what they disagree with, who's their favorite teacher, what was the most interesting thing said to them that day, what was something that confused them.
Mm,
Family meals are very important. There's a lot that goes
mm,
down at family meals, a lot you're going to learn about your kids. Putting
mm.
down your own phones, shutting down your own
Yeah.
computers so that you're present with
Mm,
your children to hear about, and to be there to answer those questions that they want to ask. So,
yeah. Yeah. So Elm Tree was your initiative. Well, a sort of a community coming
yeah,
together.
I definitely have to make that clear. It wasn't just me by
Yeah.
myself. It was a
Yeah.
bunch of us, mashallah.
Yeah. And it's grown over the years. Now, I'd love for you to, tell us a little bit about it. And also, is it something that can be sort of used in a Saturday, Sunday school kind of scenario, even within families? I'll let you sort of speak to that.
Yeah, no, alhamdulillah. I'm no longer part of Elm Tree because my children
Okay.
have graduated, and as long as your children are attending the co-op, you're a part of it. It
Mm,
was an interesting initiative that started with a bunch of us families. There were like six of us who actually there
mm,
were eight of us families that used to come together and we used to homeschool together. So like I would teach the children language arts, somebody else would teach the kids history, somebody else taught. We hired out for a science teacher, we hired out for carpentry and for drumming. And then, somebody else would teach Islamic studies. That one mom was the one who took on the younger siblings and did a little preschool with them. So, and we used to gather in a friend's home. Mashallah, her home and her property was large enough to be able to take on 24 children. And we all had
mashallah.
different duties. And we used to just call ourselves the cooperative at that time. We had no formal
Mm,
name. And I used to joke that I cleaned my friends' toilets more than I ever cleaned my own toilets because that's how much like we all like divvied up the duties and made sure that we were responsible for keeping the property clean and tidy and cleaning up after ourselves and whatnot. And then gradually, more and more people were asking to join us, asking if they could be part of our cooperative, but we couldn't take on more than 24 children in somebody's private home. So the same friend whose home we were doing the co-op in said, how about if we open this up to the public? Let's have a community meeting. Let's invite families to come, talk to us, ask their questions. We can see who they are. And then let's hand pick who we like and make this bigger. So there were eight of us families. Four families decided, I'm out. This is not what I had signed up
mm,
for. I don't want to take
mm,
on this big, project. Four of us families stayed and we opened it up to the community. We became a nonprofit that year in 2007. 18 families started out. We rented a private home in this beautiful setting on a little
mm,
creek and in the middle of the woods. It was really, really just idyllic, mashallah. And we, you know, again, every family had different responsibilities. One was the bookkeeper, one managed the website, one,
mm,
taught PE, physical education, one took care of maintenance. And then gradually, and we became a nonprofit. We named ourselves Ilm Tree. Ilm is the acronym ILM. It means knowledge in Arabic, but it stands for Islamic Learning for Muslims.
mm,
And it's also a pun, Ilm Tree, Elm Tree. And we eventually grew to 35 families
mm,
and we are now I think it's 37 families. But what happened was there were three of us running it. Three of us were called managers. So one is the manager of
mm,
facilities who runs all the operations like the day to day, like where the classes are and the maintenance of the building and the property. Then there was a manager of manager of education, so the person who was responsible for training teachers, deciding the curriculum, um, and all that, making sure students are in the right classes. And then there was the manager of adab and culture, which was what was my role. And that was the person who
beautiful.
dealt with any disciplinary issues, any interpersonal relationships between the parents,
Mm,
was kind of the face of the co-op. We didn't call ourselves a school. And
mm,
alhamdulillah, and one of the things I thought was really unique about our model is that every family was required to put in 10 hours of work in
Mm,
some capacity every week. And
mm,
each job that they took on was worth a certain number of points, and each point was worth $80, and you had to work 10 points, right? 10 hours, so each
mm,
hour was $80, and then that money that you earned could be was taken from your tuition, so you didn't have to pay that, right? You paid it in your physical labor. So people brought the talents that they were able to bring to the table. Somebody said, I'll clean the school, I'll be
mm,
responsible for making
mm,
sure it's clean. Some person said, I'll be responsible for doing all our bookkeeping. Some person said,
mm,
I'm responsible for teaching X, Y, and Z classes. But I had a scholar once, when he found out about our model, he was really blown away by that, because he said he quoted a hadith, and it was a
mm,
hadith of Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. And I don't want to say it verbatim because I don't know the hadith. I'll just give you the general meaning of
yeah.
it. But he basically, what he asked me, the scholar, he said, wait a minute, are you telling me that the person who's the principal of your co-op is paid the same for their time as the janitor who cleans the toilets? And I was like, hmm, never thought of it that way, but yeah. And he was like, subhanallah. And then he quoted this hadith of something to the effect of how a man's value or a man's worth is known by the excellence that they put into their time. And
Mm,
so the idea that you get paid $5 an hour if you clean the toilet, but $100 an hour if you're the principal,
mm,
is not
right.
in line with what that hadith is saying, right? It's about the effort and the time you're putting into the work you're doing. And so, and mashallah, I saw that. I saw, that was one thing I saw. And then another thing I saw was, one time I pulled up to the co-op and I saw a dad pull in a yellow Porsche, and he worked at Google. And then I saw
Mm,
another mom pull in, and she was a single mother on welfare, and her child was getting the same education that the Google
mm,
tech director driving a Porsche, what his kid was getting, right? Like they
mm,
they had the same opportunity to get their kids educated.
yeah.
MashaAllah. So it's a unique initiative. If anyone wants to check out the website, it's called
Yeah.
ilmtree.org, ilmtree.org. And I'm sorry, I said it was Islamic learning for Muslims. It's actually inspired learning for Muslims,
Got it.
ILM. But yeah, and so now, mashallah, the current managers who are there, they are working on uh, documenting everything that we've done and creating
Yeah.
packages so that people who want to replicate it, inshallah, hopefully can.
Can do so. And thank you so much for your time. I just got another couple of questions, and one question is, there was a recent interview you did where you had broken down, and I'd love for you to repeat it. When and where kids should be allowed to access the internet at certain ages. And I think just to perhaps jog your memory, it was something like, before the age of 10, no one's allowed to have
Mm,
access to the internet in the bedroom. It has to be out in with everyone
mhm.
else. Do you remember that? I'd love for you to sort
Yeah,
of name it for us and guide
yeah.
us.
Well, just off the top of my head, what the American Association of Pediatrics, the guidelines they've come out with, AAP,
Mm,
is that no child under the age of 2 should be around screens.
mm,
So there are products out there that are being marketed to parents where you can buy a phone holder that you put on the handle of your car seat carrier so that a
yeah,
baby can lie in the car seat looking up at the screen, right? So, but the American Association of Pediatrics says children under the age of 2 should not even be around screens. Realistically, we know that we are going to hold the phone up to our babies to have them talk to their grandparents and have
right,
them talk to parents who maybe have gone away on a business trip. So, okay, fine, use it mindfully, use it for a very short amount of time to allow your baby to maybe interact with a loved one. But other than that, do not use the phone or the computer or the tablet, any of it. Do not allow it to be used as a babysitter or a pacifier or some kind of reward system for your child under the age of 2. After the age of 2, going into the preschool years, maybe an hour a day of some kind of educational programming that
Mm,
that or maybe teaching the children something, maybe teaching them surahs or teaching them numbers or letters or whatnot, used as entertainment, but you set a timer on it and you make sure you don't go over
mm,
that time limit. I wouldn't do it like religiously. I wouldn't do it like every day.
mm,
My kid gets an hour, but if you really feel the need to, make sure that they're not getting more than an hour. And so the number one piece of advice that I give to all parents, and it always shocks me how so many parents are not even aware of this, is that you you have to treat the internet like it's a loaded weapon. And the way
mm,
you treat a loaded weapon is that you know where it is at all times. You keep it
mm,
under lock and key. You don't leave your children alone with it. You know how it's being used in other people's homes when you send your child over to play in other people's homes. You teach children how to use it safely, right? These are all the rules you have with loaded weapons. That's the same type of rule you should have about the internet. No internet privacy. If it means that you have to take your child's bedroom doors off their hinges because they're going into the room with internet enabled devices, then that's what you do. The internet should be used in a public space where at any moment you can glance over the child's
mm.
shoulder and see what they're looking at. Um, Another thing that I forgot to mention in my last talk is
Yeah.
that kids will take internet enabled devices and use them in the privacy of the bathroom. So you need to
Mm,
know where it is. I know of somebody who found out that their child was watching pornography at a very, very vulnerable age. But where? In the restroom. Because
mm,
I asked this family because I knew they had the rule of using it in a public space.
mm.
I was like, how? How did this happen? And the parent told me our child was taking it in the bathroom. So, being aware of how the internet's being
Yeah.
used and having the appropriate security uh, procedures or protections
Mm.
in place with the internet. There's a program called Griffin Connect, or maybe it's
Okay.
pronounced Gryphon Connect. People can look that up, Gryphon. Somebody was telling me about it. They were like, every night at this time, the internet goes off. Like if you're in the middle of even using it, it'll go off. A teenager was telling me about it. But you can use it the way you want it to be used, put the right protections in place. And
Right.
no smartphones before high school. So
Mm,
there's no reason a child needs a smartphone. They can make do with a flip phone, believe it or not, if they need to be in communication with
yeah.
you. And and now there are smartphones you can get for your child that look like an iPhone, that look like a Samsung, so that your child doesn't have to feel like the odd one out who's got the weirdo phone.
Mm,
They can look like they have a phone just like anybody else, but it won't have all the capabilities that smartphones have. And definitely talking to your children, if they are
yeah.
ever on the internet, if they're going to the library and they're using the internet for research, you need to have the talk with your child about pornography and what it is and how it's used to ensnare children and what you're supposed to do if you ever come across it. Not if, when you come across it, because
Yeah.
I can pretty much guarantee that all of our children are going to be exposed to pornography at some point. So you have to
Absolutely.
teach them
Absolutely.
how to deal when they do come across it, making sure your kids know that you're aware of it so that they don't think they have to protect you or that they have to hide it from you. If they come to you and tell you that I saw something weird on my computer, don't freak out. Um, when the kids are older, I can pretty much guarantee they're not going to tell you if they come across it. So
Yeah.
have the conversations when they're younger. Tell them the 3 steps. The 3 steps that we taught our children is when you come across something you weren't looking for, or something that's weird or that's taken over your computer, and you know it's something displeasing to Allah, something you're not supposed to look at. The first thing you do is you get it out of your sight. That's the first thing you do. Turn off the computer, power down the phone, avert your eyes,
Mm,
look away, whatever you have to do, get it out of your sight. The second thing you do is you say "A'udhu billah minash shaitanir rajim," because you have to recognize that you are in the presence of shaitan. You're in a shaitani environment and you need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help to protect you. And the third thing you do is you go and tell an adult. These
mm,
are the things we taught our kids when they were younger, like up to the age of 10, 11, 12.
mm,
Most
mm.
pornography addiction happens between the ages of 10 and 12. And reassuring the children, I'm not going to freak out. You are not going to be in trouble. I am not going to give you the
Yeah.
third degree about how you came across this. You just need to tell me so that I can help protect you because I'm on your team. And and then after the age of 12, if they come across it, then they need to at that point they need to know the right thing to do. And inshallah they will
Right.
know because you've told them.
Inshallah. Finally, as parents, there's always I think as 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 individuals, and then you come together as parents, there are different personalities, and what might seem harmless to me might be harmful to you, and vice versa. What are some non-negotiables as a couple that, what, we may not see eye to eye on some things, but here
Mhm,
are the non-negotiables where we cannot divert from our stance. What would you advise parents? What, these are the top three, or you live in a world of top five and top threes, but these are your non-negotiables as a parents, as parents.
mhm,
And it could be with regards to whether it's the internet usage, whether it's video games, whether it's the type of video games, whether it's
mhm,
the time, or whether it's how we practice the deen, or how we call the
mhm,
kids to the deen, whatever comes to mind.
mhm. Um, the non-negotiables, I'm trying to think what were some non-negotiables we had.
Sure.
Um, well, if I had a daughter, for sure, I think a non-negotiable I would have is allowing her to spend the night in somebody else's home without a mahram there. I think that would be a non-negotiable that both parents should be on the same page about. And there's creative ways of working around it. I'm a firm believer that your children should not grow up hearing no, no, no constantly. You have to be creative and think of a way of saying yes, but getting it the way you want it. You want it to be given to you. So, okay, we don't do sleepovers in other people's homes, but if mama can come with you and there's only women in the home and the dads and the brothers are gone, then mama can come with you and you guys can have a sleepover in
Mm,
your best friend's home. Or your best friends are allowed to come over and spend the night here and baba will leave and we'll make sure to have a big fun pajama party. um so that's a way of allowing your child to have a sleepover
mm,
even though you're saying no, right? To
mm.
allowing them to go spend the night. So, yeah, I would always know where my child, a daughter, especially where she's sleeping at night and who has access to her. So that would
And the
be
same
it.
for boys as well. The same for boys as well.
You know, for boys, not so much. I didn't. We did allow our boys to have sleepovers with their friends, and but when there were no girls in the home. Yeah, we did have those
Mm,
gender rules were the same,
mm,
but in that sense, I think girls are a lot more vulnerable
mm,
and um the sleepovers with boys, it was literally just a handful of people. It was like people we knew
mm,
inside and out, like people who came and stayed with us, people our kids went and stayed with, and like my own nephews, right? Um, so people that I knew the parents were on the same page as us. I knew the parents were going to wake everyone up for prayer. I knew that the food in the home is halal. I knew that the internet was locked down. I knew that whatever they watch on TV is going to be fine. Um, Honestly, the biggest danger for us at our kids' sleepovers were that our friends had a swimming pool. So it was only after our
mm.
kids knew how to swim that they were allowed to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that would be one non-negotiable. Um, Another non-negotiable would be yeah, no internet privacy. That was a
Mm,
non-negotiable for us. Yeah,
yeah.
we always,
Okay.
when one of my kids' friends came and stayed with us for a number of months, And before he came to stay with us, we set down a couple of rules, and one of our rules was you can't take your phone into your bedroom with you. Like, I'm sorry, I know you're
Yeah.
a teenager, you may think you're an adult, your parents may allow you to do it, but in our home, the cell phones are charged outside of the bedroom and you have an alarm clock in your bedroom. And he went and bought
Mm.
spent money to buy himself an alarm clock because that was a rule in our home. So I think those would be.
Uh, um, so did I interrupt you? Were you saying something,
No,
or you
no,
finished
not at
that?
all.
You,
I'm honestly, I'm trying to
okay.
think about what the non-negotiables were. Yeah, our
Mm.
non-negotiables were, I think, rules around gender relations as our boys became teenagers. My siblings
Oh, so important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my siblings
Mm.
had the same rules, so it helped because my boys are close to their cousins. They are close to the girls and the guys, but the rules of gender interaction were the same for all of us. Like they would go out for boba drinks and now, as young adults for coffee drinks, but they never went without a mahram. I was the only one who had
Mm.
three boys. I didn't have a daughter, but my siblings have sons and daughters. So their daughters didn't go out unless their brothers were with them, and
Mm.
the boys didn't go with any of the girls unless the girls' brothers were with them. So, we had those kinds of rules in place, even with cousins.
So, but so if I heard you correctly, so the girls would go out with other
Their
girls, that's
brothers.
fine. But if there were other boys,
So
oh, so
so
the
if
girls would go out with other girlfriends.
so if my nieces went out to get boba drinks with my boys, they only did it if their brothers were coming with them. Does that make sense? But
Yeah.
if their brothers, like I remember one time they made a movie plan and the girls were able to go, but their brothers weren't able to go, and like my boys were able to go, but the plan got nixed. It was like, no,
Oh, I see.
a mahram
Got it.
has to be there.
Got it. Got it.
So
But if the girls were going out with girls, that's fine.
yeah, girls
Yeah,
going out with girls, yeah.
that's fine. Um, there's so much that you said. Like there are separate episodes or separate discussions and forums, and I really, with gratitude, want to thank you for your time
Mhm.
and your attention. And Allah bless you and your family and your children.
Ameen.
I mean,
Ameen.
and bless your work, and may Allah, increase you in darajat and place barakah in every word that you say and everything that you do. Ameen. Rabbul
Ameen.
Alameen. And I thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair. I'm so grateful for the opportunity, and mashallah, this is wonderful work that you're doing. Again, it's another thing of the internet can be used two ways, right? You can be putting out filth and content that is going to harm people and lead them astray, or you can put out content that's going to benefit and educate and inshallah bring people closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the way of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And thank you for allowing me to be part of this work and for trusting me with this heavy subject matter. I pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives any mistakes that we made and,
Ameen. Ameen.
rewards us for anything that can help anyone,
Ameen.
inshallah, and makes this a sadaqah jariyah for us and
Ameen.
protects our children, our
Ameen.
grandchildren, our families. Ameen
Ameen.
ya Rabbi.
Ameen. Hina Khan Mukhtar, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes. Bye.